Once a month, when the moon reaches its highest point in the sky and the wild creatures call out to the night, he emerges from a private sanctuary in an undisclosed location outside of Little Rock, Arkansas. Arrayed in his priestly vestments, carrying forth the good news that comic books and graphic novels aren't just for kids, that they aren't just mass and spandex superheroes, that storytelling in a graphic format can be so much more. He is the Graphic Novel Apostle.
Hello, and welcome back to the Graphic Novel Apostle podcast. I'm your host, Mark Orenberger. So happy to be here with you, as always. This week on a Wednesday instead of our normal Monday. You know, it's Thanksgiving week here in America. A wonderful week where a lot of us have a little bit of time off, get the opportunity, hopefully, to spend time with friends, with family, take some time to think about the people that we love and the things that we're most thankful for in life. Hopefully get together and enjoy a good meal. And maybe you've got some traveling to do this week to reunite with some of those people in your life. Well, the Graphic Novel Apostle has you covered. Hope you enjoy this episode, which is part 2 of our Batman the Long Halloween series. If you didn't catch part 1 of this series, let me refer you back to episode 19 of the podcast. And hey, while you're back there, maybe you ought to take a look and see if there are some other episodes you missed. Or, it's been a month. Maybe you don't remember all the ins and outs of what happened in Batman the Long Halloween issue 1, the October issue. And if so, just go on back to episode 19 and listen again. I'm not going to be mad at you. But as we dive into Batman the Long Halloween issue 2 this month, which was published by DC Comics in November of 1996, and as you'll recall, written by Jeph Loeb with art by Tim Sale. Let's just remind ourselves of 3 significant developments that took place in issue number 1. First, you had the death of Johnny Viti at the hands of an unknown killer. This will be the assassin we're trying to track down in this series. And by the way, I should note while I'm here, I listened back to our last episode, and I referred to him as Johnny Vito a bunch of times. Sorry about that confusion. His name is Johnny Viti, and you may recall that he is the nephew of Carmine the Roman Falcone, the big crime boss in Gotham City, and also muscle for the Falcone crime family. Next, we had Batman and District Attorney Harvey Dent sneak into a warehouse that was just filled with cash they'd been tipped off to by Catwoman. You'll recall, some of that cash belonged to the Roman himself, some of it belonged to his sister and somewhat rival gangster, Carla Falcone, and some of it also belonged to Sal Maroni, one of the other rival gangsters in Gotham City. And I suppose we don't know whether anybody else's cash was in this warehouse as well. But Batman and Dent cover that cash in gasoline and light it ablaze. Then the third major development at the end of issue 1 was Harvey Dent returning to his house on Halloween night, only to open a package and have his entire house explode. Now as we prepare to move into issue 2, let's take just a moment to reflect on the murder of Johnny Viti and who might have been behind it. Remember, we saw the hands of the killer in their workshop, preparing a gun with tape on its grip and with a baby bottle nipple over its nose to act as a type of makeshift silencer. Remember also that we saw Captain Jim Gordon in his house washing some dishes, including some baby bottles. And we saw Harvey Dent working in a shop in his basement with some tools that certainly resembled some of the tools that the killer was using. But who else might have been interested in bumping off Johnny Viti? Remember, Carmine Falcone had brought Viti back into the good graces of his family, but it was only after a botched attempt to have Viti killed. So who knows, maybe the peace in the family isn't such a genuine peace after all. Then there's Carmine's son, Alberto Falcone. Now, we didn't see any particular animosity from Alberto toward Johnny Viti, but we do know that Alberto felt like he'd been sidelined and was being kept out of the family business. Well, Johnny Viti got to be the muscle. Maybe that one's a stretch, but I don't know. Maybe he is a suspect. What about Salvatore Maroni? Maybe he saw an opportunity to weaken the Roman by driving a wedge between him and his sister, if suspicions arose around the death of Viti. I suppose we have any number of possibilities in play at this point. And then the other mystery we're going to have to solve is, who is responsible for bombing Harvey Dent's house? Well, as we open issue 2, the very first image we see on the first page, and by the way, we'll include a copy of this splash page on our Instagram, @GraphicNovelApostle, along with some other samples of the art from this issue. So if you're not reading along, you can at least get an idea of what the art looks like. So on this opening splash page, we have Batman, shrouded in shadow, standing in what appears to be an office, and he just says, "Harvey Dent is dead." As we move forward, we see that he's actually in the office of Captain Jim Gordon, and Gordon is there with him, as well as a suspect who's sitting in a chair. This suspect is a small-time criminal named Mickey the Mink Sullivan, and he leads a gang of criminals called the Irish. And in true detective style, Batman starts laying out the evidence that he has against Mickey. They had found a nail that had been used in the bomb, used the serial number off the nail to trace it back to the factory where it was made, to the shop where it was sold, and even to get the receipt that showed that Mickey was the purchaser of that nail. We also get a little flashback showing how Mickey came to be in custody to begin with. He's sitting in his apartment, having a drink, when all of a sudden he hears a voice in the darkness telling him that he's guilty. Of course we know this is Batman. And he jumps straight out the window of his apartment, right through the glass, down to the street, and he runs into the sewer as a place to try and hide. Batman will find him there in the sewer. This is almost an irrelevant aside, except that it gives us an opportunity to encounter Solomon Grundy, a figure who is a bit of an enigma in the Batman universe. Sometimes Grundy is presented as a villain, sometimes he's just presented as a monster. Either way, he's a man with a very simple mind, enormous brute strength and size, and a penchant for repeating the nursery rhyme about Solomon Grundy, born on a Monday, from which he took his name. I mention this because while it is a small aside from the main plot of the story, it's just fun to see the greater universe that's been created over the years around Batman in Gotham City, and all of its colorful characters. After a short fistfight with Grundy, Batman immobilizes his foe, and then is able to pick up Mickey and take him to prison. Moving back into the present tense, surprisingly, Mickey the Mink confesses to having done the bombing, and he even says he'll put it in writing. And along the way during his confession drops a suspicion of his that prior to his death, District Attorney Harvey Dent had in fact been responsible for the killing of Johnny Viti. Of course, this infuriates Captain Gordon, and he tells one of the officers to get him out of his office. Now, as the officer is walking Mickey back to his cell, we have just one panel where the lights go out black, and then they come back on, and Mickey is returned to his cell, where he's around the rest of his gang. After spending a few minutes together in the cell, each of the members is brought individually to be questioned by Captain Gordon and Batman. And because this is Gotham City, of course, the Irish gangsters all have colorful nicknames. We've got Jimmy Slick, Dapper Kevin, Willie Two Times, who repeats everything that he says, and Donny Boy. And each of these guys, in turn, confesses to some portion of being involved in the bombing, either driving the getaway car or being the one who actually carried the package to the house. And each of them even offers to put their confession in writing. Now, Batman knows this just doesn't add up. These guys could be looking at life sentences. Why on earth would they confess so easily to a crime like this? And while the other members of the gang are being questioned, Mickey is brought back up to Captain Gordon's office. Except that in the classic style of Ethan Hunt, Tom Cruise's character from Mission Impossible, Mickey reaches down and starts to pull on a latex mask and brings it off of his face, and reveals that during that brief blackout, the real Mickey had been switched with this man in the mask, who is none other than District Attorney Harvey Dent. Apparently this was a ruse to try and see if Dent could get the other members to talk about Falcone setting them up for the job, because our crime fighters believe that the Roman was the figure responsible for having the bombing of Dent's house take place. Interestingly, while tearing off his mask, Dent makes the statement that, "I don't know how you do it, Bats, being two people at once, assuming you are two people." Of course, we know that eventually District Attorney Harvey Dent is going to become the criminal known as Two-Face after he has acid thrown on his face, disfiguring one side of him. And so the idea of being two people is a bit of foreshadowing here for this character. Now, all of these events I've described to you have taken place on Thanksgiving Day in Gotham. And at the end of all this questioning of witnesses, each of our crime fighters goes his separate way. Gordon goes home to his wife, who has had to delay Thanksgiving dinner for hours while Gordon was back at the station. Dent goes back to the hospital, where his wife is recovering from her injuries from the explosion. And Batman, the lonely crime fighter, goes back out on patrol, but he stops to deliver a plate of Thanksgiving dinner down in the sewers to be left for Solomon Grundy. A bit of humanity in the Batman character. In less than an hour after their confessions, remarkably, all of the Irish gangsters have been bailed out of jail, and they go back to what looks like a hotel suite, where they're enjoying a giant Thanksgiving dinner, and they're raising a glass to the founder of the feast, to the Roman. But as they're making their toast, we get a page turn, and we go back to our black and white motif that we had in issue number 1, when the killer was making preparations for the murder of Johnny Viti, and we see the hand of our killer slowly open the door to the hotel suite where the Irish gangsters all look in surprise and are shot one at a time. So we end the issue with another splash page, all in black and white, showing the dead bodies of these Irish gangsters, Mickey included, sitting around the table where they were having their Thanksgiving dinner. And we have just one little bit of color. There's a cornucopia, a gun, the nipple of a baby bottle, and some shell casings. Well, that wraps up issue 2 of Batman the Long Halloween. Next month will be time for our Christmas murder when we come back in December for Batman the Long Halloween Part 3. Thanks for listening, everybody. I look forward to seeing you back here next week. And until then, keep reading those comics.